Digital Foundry is proudly sponsored by Omen's new wireless range of mice, keyboards, and headsets.
So RTX 3080 reviews are out, and it's looking like a performance upgrade over the RTX 2000 series in rasterization and in ray tracing performance. But how does it take on the new boss in town that is Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020? And how does it compare to the RTX 2080 Ti? To talk about that and more, I'm joined by my friend and colleague, John Linneman. How you doing there, John?
I'm doing pretty good, Alex. I'm joining you today from a remote laptop because my PC has melted into a puddle of black mush after trying to play too much Flight Sim. This game runs hot. But Alex, I gotta know, so why is this game bossing PCs?
Yeah, well, basically the high and very high settings in this game use such distances and lots of samples and things like that, things that games don't actually usually put into their settings, and that's why at high and very high settings this game runs like a next-gen game.
So wait, is this the new Crysis?
In a lot of ways it is.
I mean, I feel like we've been waiting for this. Like, you know, there's Crysis, there was Metro 2033, I guess I could say Star Citizen,
yeah.
But now there's Flight Sim, and it is an absolutely stunning looking game for sure. And it's so interesting to see just how dense the options are and how far you can push it out.
I've come to love this game, and we're going to find a way in time to build it into our PC benchmarks. With some changes though, it needs to be changed over time. They need some patches. But basically, also as part of this video, we wanted to check out how this game scales in comparison to the last best graphics card in the RTX 2080 Ti. We're seeing some good gains in other games, but how does it actually scale in this kind of mammoth game that really eats as much GPU as it can? And for that, I basically made a number of AI paths through a variety of different scenarios in the game with different weather and different locations, basically to see which areas scale differently between the two cards. And I first started off in this area in southern Germany, one that I actually visited recently, and I captured this photo while I was there, and I compared it to how it looks in Flight Simulator 2020, and it's surprisingly similar, but it also shows at the same time how far we have to go in modern rendering still till we can approximate real life.
I mean, it's not quite as impressive as the DirectX 10 versus DirectX 9 photo, to be honest, but it is up there.
It's definitely not. There's a good historical reference for those of you who know that.
I mean, that is one of the most engaging aspects of playing Flight Sim, I think, is just exploring areas that you've been from above. I mean, it's the same sort of like appeal that you get from playing like Google Earth VR, I think.
Oh, it's completely that.
But I mean, Flight Sim is even a step above that. I mean, there's definitely some similarities in the way that it renders terrain due to the photogrammetry nature of, I forget how they captured all of this landmass.
Yeah.
So that, you know, if you look closely, you see issues, but during normal flight, it really is convincing. Just not quite. Like, you can see they're knocking at the door.
It needs a little bit more time and tuning and probably more tech and things like that, even more power. So yeah, going through this area though, I could find between the RTX 2080 Ti and RTX 3080, I saw that the RTX 3080 was around 24.5% faster on average. And this is a rather non-populated area with a lot of clouds and even not a lot of trees necessarily in the view, since it's a lot of like plains and farmland below. Going into the next area though, that's a very different kind of setting. One that I found out in my last video on this game, that when you go to really highly populated area with a lot of buildings and they use the photogrammetry a lot, if you do it at nighttime where there's a lot of lights, the game just becomes exponentially heavier. Whereas in this area in the southern part of Germany, it was maybe like in the 50s or maybe upper 40s on the RTX 2080 Ti. If you go to Tokyo at night and you kind of get close to the ground, it'll be in like the 30s.
Yeah.
This game has really big differences of rendering load depending upon what is on screen, and some areas are much heavier than others. In this area, this is actually where we see the biggest upgrade in performance from the RTX 3080 over the RTX 2080 Ti, with it running on average 27.6% faster, which is pretty good. Actually not too bad.
I mean, yeah, that's a reasonable jump, although I'm finding that the performance increase here is somewhat less than most other games we've tested on the 3080.
We go to other areas and the performance upgrade is even less than we see in these two first stages that I just talked about. In New York, the RTX 3080 here is only 21.6 faster. Into another area where I was looking at the very specific kind of dual cloud layer that this game very uniquely has, where clouds can shadow other clouds below them, and I found out that's really, really heavy on the GPU. The RTX 3080 here is only 22% faster. And in the training mission, where oddly enough there's not a lot that's interesting going on, for some reason that's 24% faster. So there's slight variations between all of these. With the Tokyo area, which is the heaviest part on the GPU, having the largest differential.
Unfortunately, so none of these percentages really get you up to that smooth 60 frames per second.
That's true.
And unfortunately, this is a game that seems to have issues with the way it handles, I guess, frame rate caps.
Yeah, there's basically the fact that the game is itself very CPU limited. I went around and tried to do these tests in the area around Doha, Qatar, and I found that for some reason this area and its very specific usage of buildings that has, very CPU limited, and I only saw a 12.4% difference between the RTX 2080 Ti and the RTX 3080 because the RTX 3080 was being completely underutilized, 60 and 70% GPU utilization. So the game in general has a very low CPU ceiling above 60 FPS in a lot of areas.
And this is on the i9, right?
And this is on the i9 10900K.
Yeah, so it's just absurd how much this is demanding from CPUs.
Yeah, and I heard there's going to be a patch to fix this perchance, making it a little bit better in CPU utilization. But even if you're at 60 FPS and you have enough GPU headroom above it, enough CPU headroom above it, I found out that Flight Simulator is still dropping frames, and I'm not sure why. I think it has to do with the way the game handles VSync, because you can't actually turn VSync off in this game. So River Tuner's statistics server will say you're at 60 FPS in game, and it's actually reading that. That means the game is producing frames at 60 FPS, but the game's presentation of these frames doesn't seem right.
Yeah, it's a pet peeve of ours, I think.
And it's basically our tools, or FCAT, will pick up frame drops of frames that actually were spit out by the renderer and presented to you, but your RTSS may not. So if you're playing this game and you feel like you're getting performance that doesn't line up with what your frame time graphs are telling you, it could be due to that. But also just in general, when playing this game, seeing how there's different percentages between each area that you do your benchmarking in, it really calls into question how we do benchmarking in general, or just how benchmarking should be done. Because depending upon the way you look at this, you could say, oh, there's only a 21.6% difference between these cards, with the RTX 3080 being this much faster. Or if you look at another area, it's almost 28% in Tokyo. We have this problem generally when benchmarking games to finding representative areas, and that's not exactly easy. It's kind of something that you've struggled with before in console game reviews, right, Sean?
Oh yeah, for sure.
In this kind of instance, when a game has such variable performance, it's good to actually show off a variety of areas and then kind of speculate on why it is the way it is. In this case, I actually tend to think that anything that is more shading heavy, where it spends most of its time in the double FP32 performance that we see on the RTX 3080, that it actually sees greater scaling overall. Other areas in the game that are limited by different aspects of the GPU, I would imagine, like here in New York, could be actually just geometry throughput or something like that. We're going to see different level of scaling. It's not going to be as high.
So yeah, there's really no currently any effective way to just optimize your performance across the game. This is a game where it's just going to vary depending on where you're flying, and you have to take that into account.
Yeah, and the best way really though to do a flat level of scaling, which is imperfect, is by dropping resolution to 80% at 4K, which is what I did here, and I played the game for around 2 hours. And I found that actually, in comparison to my RTX 2080 Ti experience with this game, basically every single area that I could was locked to 60 FPS GPU-wise. In this, only the tiniest, like extremely GPU-heavy areas, a town, at night, clouds above, lots of lights, that's when the game would drop into the 50s. So even with this massive new GPU, this game at my optimized settings and optimized resolution is still not going to be a flat 60. And really until they change the way that they do VSync presentation in this game, and also add in new CPU optimizations so that you don't need the best high-end Intel to essentially make this game run at 60 FPS, and instead slower Ryzen cores, but many of them could actually be used instead of sitting idle. I don't think many people are going to be playing this game at a real locked 60 FPS for quite some time.
No, I think I'd be okay with a properly frame-paced 30, to be honest. If we can get it to that,
yeah.
It does seem like there's enough headroom on a high-end PC to at least optimize for 30 frames per second.
There definitely is, excluding one thing that I found out. Occasionally the frame rate does tumble, and I'm not sure why. So I go back to that area in Doha, for example, and there's, for some reason, the FPS graph goes crazy and dips, and you see tons of stalling on both GPUs at this one area, and it seems to be some sort of CPU related weirdness that happens occasionally in the game, where it just suddenly drops frames. You can also see it in the New York stage when you cross this invisible threshold at one point, and both GPUs see pretty large drops, with the RTX 3080 seeing slightly less of a drop. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't actually line up with the actual CPU performance or GPU performance you should expect. It's just something craters performance all of a sudden.
It makes you wonder how much headroom there is for optimization, like where they're at in the development process, if they can actually improve this, or if it's just that the techniques that they're using to display this world are so demanding on the hardware that we're just going to have to accept this and continue to upgrade our hardware in time.
I hope so in the end too, because this game right now, it's heavy reasonably, I would say, in terms of GPU stuff, but this weird CPU performance and the weird frame drops just are not right. In the end, RTX 3080, when I averaged all my tests together, excluding the one in Doha, this thing was around 24% faster on average than the RTX 2080 Ti, which is not bad, not bad. Could be a little bit better, perhaps under DX12. We'll see in time. But John, thank you for joining me and talking to me about how the RTX 3080 performs in comparison to the RTX 2080 Ti in Flight Sim.
I enjoyed your ramblings about all your tests. I know you've been busy testing the heck out of this game this week, so it is nice to know that I'm not alone in struggling to achieve excellent performance in this game.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to be honest, I think it's great that we're seeing a PC game that really pushes the PC again.
Yeah.
I think we've lamented this for a while, that the PC had become a console port place, essentially, where you're just playing enhanced versions of console games. But this is a proper PC game that's really pushing the platform hard, and it's introducing new visual techniques and features that we've not really seen like this before. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I do too. And I also like that it's going to, as we can see here, I'm not getting 4K 60 FPS or whatever on a brand new amazing GPU. It's going to scale over time, and I really, really like games that offer options to do that. But yeah, thanks again, John.
Sure.
If you did like this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you're already a subscriber, then please consider hitting that little bell in the corner to be informed as soon as Digital Foundry posts a video. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, consider supporting us on Patreon to get years worth of Digital Foundry content available in high quality for download.
Oh yeah.
If you want to talk to John or myself about Flight Sim, write a comment below or follow John and me on Twitter. And as always, this is Alex bidding you farewell, and
my PC is on fire.
Featuring its new Warp wireless technology, Omen's PC peripherals allow for lag-free gaming. From the 360-degree audio of its Omen frequency headphones, the 180-hour battery life of the Vector mouse, and the 2.4 GHz connection of its Spacer keyboard, Omen has you covered for the ultimate wireless experience.